question that is really challenging, I think, for a lot of people. Like, especially now as we kind of mind mapped our own selves, we're self-policing ourselves almost into these like categories of processing things. And it's really challenging to then like be able to step out of that and be like, wait, well, what if I just experience this as a child's mind would, and go from there? And it's something that I've been really working on. I mean, I appreciate other artists who kind of prioritize that experience, and it's mostly rooted in improvisation. That's where I get a lot of the experience of that. Is like, how do I like the metrics of success for me when I'm performing are not like, oh, did I succeed in executing X, Y, and Z, but rather like, was I present and did I commit to every decision I made in that moment, whether or not it succeeded, but that's not really the point of that. And it's not to say that I'm not practicing it. I have a whole arsenal of language that I'm using and I practice very consciously, but what you're experiencing is only like 40% of that, because that's the point of it, is that it's a language, and it's supposed to be kind of done and delivered authentically to this exact moment.
Hi. Hello. My first question was, where are we? But now I think that that's kind of relevant. So that strikes me that you say that folks come in with, let's say, maybe some baggage. They come in with a lot of expectation and ideas, and you're kind of saying, let's check that at the door. What do you think that that's, when you're drawing on these languages, isn't that kind of taunting them? Like, I don't know. Can somebody check that experience at the door and also have the same sort of tangible sort of experience with the language that you're trying to?
I think it's less about like oppositionality and more about what I try to do, like especially at the beginning, the early parts of when I was improvising, it was very raw. So it was almost like theater, where you sort of take something and a human experience and you blow it up and then dramatize it. And so a lot of the earlier stuff was very much like, ah! like very kind of, and I got bored of that process pretty quickly, because I realized that I didn't want to dictate emotionally exactly what the listener should experience. The very nature of my instrument, being the voice, it's already implied that there is an incredible, rich landscape of references and associations that people will have with it. So I had a lot more fun focusing on more sort of actually traditional musical ideas like polyphony, pitch, harmony, rhythm, and then allowing for the instrument, the voice, to kind of cover the ground of the emotional richness that I think is present. And I'm not trying to deny that from the experience, but rather have it be open and free and kind of on the table for you as like found objects that you can then just like pick for yourselves and sort of bring light to. And a lot of that practice comes from just simply living away from this and actually just experiencing the world. And I didn't get weird in the sense that like I was only listening to like like Whitney, Mariah, like my girls until I was like 23, and then I decided to go to a music program for a master's at that point and hadn't had much formal training up until that point. So I had, again, it was like that outsider's kind of lens into a very institutionalized practice, and I think as a result am able to bring a certain first principles kind of thing to music that I really enjoy and try to lean into. But yeah, initially, I think the point is to kind of allow for maximum associative freedom. And I think what is rigorous is the process, in that it is improvised and that there is a practice and an actual discipline behind that. And then all these sort of associations, the aesthetics and all of those things, they are fluid. They're fluidly, they evolve, and they have evolved over the past 8-9 years. And I guess right now it was sort of like a very noisy space, and initially, I think I had to kind of go away from a lot of the things that were like music, like Western harmony and even just words, like text. I had to kind of go away from for a long time. And so there was a good 2-3 year period where my music was like really brutal and like super harsh, like devoid of any melody, any text, it was like super hardcore. And only now in the past like 3 or 4 years have I started to bring in like melody and words, and I think I have built a sense of confidence to understand even why I would choose to do that. So it's in flux, but right now it feels like an open plane for me. Yeah.
I have some more questions, but I want to hear some more reactions. I know there's a lot of musicians and sound artists out here in the audience because I heard you chatting in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you on that note, like about, there's a sense of, at first I was thinking danger about the music, but there's something, it's maybe more of a risk taking, because you have, it's we're reaching the limits between sexuality, like the sex sounds, the vomit sounds, these like very visceral, physical responses, but then also with the feedback loops happening, and a lot of people are sensitive to that, and you're kind of on the edge of like waiting for this. There's something very risky going on. So why do you want that space to be there?
Yeah. My goal every time I perform is to almost bring myself to the edge of nowhere. So in this idea that I've like constructed this obstacle course that I'm solving for at live in real time, and like basically if I lapse in focus, this entire thing could collapse. Yeah.
That's the risk too, is that you need the continuity for that entire piece to go. Yeah.
And I think that's fun for me. Like the idea of like doing that is very life affirming for me. This idea of kind of like bringing myself there, and in the context of a performance where I can take these things and elevate them on a stage and actually have like witnesses to that, is something that's very much driving a lot of why I'm doing anything. And then the voice, actually, it's funny, it almost came out of like so I have this like real obsession with like the illusion of things being more interesting than like the thing in itself. So like, for example, like looping, people who use looping pedals, right? Like you can just literally use technology to like create the effect that you want. But if you just use yourself to get there, it sometimes, and most of the time, actually gets to a more interesting place. And so maybe you heard in my music, like I'm doing a lot of integrated like repetition, for example. And so it gives you the sense of what you need, which is repetition, without necessarily using technology to like plug and play that for me. And so what I'm drawing this to is a lot of the use of the voice initially was me just like not knowing how to use like Ableton, like not knowing how to use like
the truth comes out,
like just like not knowing how to use like a looping machine. And so as a result, I just started to achieve the thing using my voice, and I realized that like, wait, hold on, that one-to-one experience actually is getting to a more interesting outcome. And then I started to realize that the voice is like a synthesizer itself, and there's like incredible things you can do with it, and I haven't even scratched the surface of that, So like, I think, what starts out as a kind of janky initial thing then evolves into its own instrument and its own practice. So that's kind of the like logistical reasons why. And I think that I've always tried to kind of ground my music ultimately still in the voice, even as I've gone more technologically advanced and tried to bring all of these things. It's always in service of the language. Like I'm trying to distort and augment it and distend and kind of flip things on its side, but at the end of the day, it's still grounded in the vocabulary that's coming out of my body. So, yeah. I think
behind you and then
yeah.
red hat.
Yeah. I love the like miming of holding a mic as being like more performative, like as we're talking about the illusion of something like.
Seeing you perform, just like thinking about what it means for these sounds to come from like a feminine presenting body or person and like have all the sounds be coming from the body, especially like right now, and like the like femmes and feminine bodies and just like bodies in general are so like policed and politicized, and like what it means for those sounds to like not be pretty and be kind of like ugly or like distorted like you're talking about. So I was thinking about that for sure.
Mine, the originations of that feeling comes actually from my, I almost feel like some of my heritage, like just being Cantonese. My parents are from Hong Kong, and they migrated to Australia in the 80s. But I grew up speaking the language, and there's this idea, there's this concept. Does anyone speak Cantonese here? No Cantonese speakers? Oh my God. Okay. Well, there's this idea called dok. Called dok jong, which means like to call someone dok jong is to kind of describe them as being like self-conscious to the point of exaggeration. So when we think of like a lot of like a young actor, for example, and you can sense that they have a third eye watching you, like watching them, and the idea that everything is poised, everything is like, and in Cantonese, that's a denigrated idea. Like that's something that's like it's laughed upon, basically. And so I grew up confronting this idea of like, you're being jok-jok, you're being jok-jok, like all the time. And the language itself, Cantonese, is like really like guttural and corporeal kind of sounding. And I think as a result, I was sort of kind of pushed to get in there, like don't be kind of having that lens of someone else watching you, just get to be direct and raw, and all of these things are part of the same whole of what we think of as beauty. So some of what you're sensing, I think, for me, when I really think about it, comes from that Cantonese kind of culture. I think you had a question.
I think that's very palpable also for me. Like I definitely had that sense growing up, like of being too loud, too present, too hairy, too everywhere, and everything that we're supposed to be doing as feminized individuals, whether or not that's how you want to present. When people inflict that on you, you start to minimize yourself in some ways, and I felt that same way. That was kind of pushing against that of like, oh, you think I need to be proper in this way? Well, I'll show you how I can be proper. and there is something about that. Yeah. And so I wanted to ask you about modulating kind of experiences. Like, if we're already going there, then we're going there. So thinking about like the recent discourses about gender nonconformity in our contemporary society, and the rigidity that is trying to be upheld about, you know, where are the limits of what you can do, where can you, and that's a kind of a modulation, right? Moving from one gender to the next, or when you're doing those, you have the loops of the actual feedback loops that you're creating with feedback, but then when you're mimicking them, and that's a feedback loop of
Right.
the feedback loop,
Right.
modulating sort of that electronic element and integrating the voice into all of that. So for me, that sounds like a type of resistance, but only, but I feel like there's a risk there. I feel like somebody's going to come and try to police you, like tell you you can't modulate. That's too much. Like that.
Yeah.
Here's the limit. Here's the voice. This is what you're doing with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I've surprised myself, and I've been surprised by the like openness by which I've been able to share this. Like when I was just getting started in New York, I had maybe like one show every few months, and then it accelerated to like, because it's all improvised, like the practice is performing. And I think at my peak was at like 100 shows a year. I was also working arts administration full time. And it was interesting how many spaces I was able to be present in, and just like not need to filter myself too much, like ranging from like basements, there's holes in the ceilings, to like the Lincoln Center or MoMA, like large institutions that you feel like would be a bit antagonistic to it. And I think there's something about that. And one of my favorite shows ever was like at a school for like 9-year-olds. Like I performed for like 9-year-olds. And it was the coolest thing ever, because at that point, they're just like associating with life. They're like, oh my God, that's like my mom when she makes sounds in the morning, or like that's my dad on the toilet. Like, you know, like there's just like very, like, it's just so beautiful. Like there's just complete like one-to-one like life associations. But it was, yeah, it's interesting. Like I have felt my personal experience has been that when you enter a space with openness, and you declare what you're doing as what it is, like you're not trying to hold people's hands too much through an experience, but rather just let it exist. I have found the baseline intelligence of most people, like, will meet it. Like they actually will, if they don't even get it, but they'll at least like be like, well, that's something, you know, like, you know, like, well, that's something. And I've like performed on the street before, and like you just get like, yeah, like it's actually, it gives me hope for like what we experience like digitally versus what we experience like IRL. It gives me hope that like there's actually some tension there, and that despite the fact that it seems like those vibrations are getting closer, like there's still poles. And so I don't know, in my experience, like it motivates me to continue the live practice and continue trying to kind of infiltrate like any sort of new space and context that I've been in, and like really kind of make that a social practice, because I do think there is something really special about that, and that ability to kind of normalize this and continue to do that, I think has like some effects that I may not experience in my life, but I think as a movement will matter in like the next 100 years, you know. I think there were a couple of questions.
Earlier you described what you were doing as like a race to nothingness, and I was just curious like what that nothingness was on like a spiritual or philosophical level. But also I find it, I mean, I'm also an improviser, and I find that like my peak is like it's more of an everythingness, personally speaking. You know, so I was wondering what is that nothingness, and how does it relate to coming into yourself as an embodied person as you continue through your performances.
Yeah, not to be too Nietzschean about it. It's like, I think I had that revelation of like nothing matters and therefore everything matters. Like I had that clicked for me really profoundly, like maybe 5 years ago. But I agree with you. I think they're very closely tied together though. And I think what it is it's ultimately kind of pure presence. And that I achieve offline with my meditation, but which I do every day. But I think this is like, for me, creative presence. And what I find really special about live performance is like, it's such a rare experience, especially today, to be able to have all of your attention for like 10 minutes. Like that is so profound of like an ask. And I just cherish that so much. Like I take that experience so seriously, and that like, holy crap, like I have all of your brains like just with me for like a minute, and so I really don't take that lightly, and I use that as like my creative tool. It's interesting, last month I was in Riga in Latvia and performed for 1,000 seated people, like silent. Like there was no bar, like it was literally just like you guys,
like the BBC
like 1,000 of you. Yeah, in this like warehouse, and they're like Latvian, right? So it's like, it's like, I don't know if you've been, I've never been that far east, but it's like there's also like Nordic influences. So everyone is basically like this. You know what I mean? Like at night they just become like gnomes, but like it was so crazy. Like there's just like, I just a weird window into like Latvian culture. There's like 1,000 people just like sitting down. And so I was like, ooh, I'm gonna weave in like drops, like big drops of just silence. And it was the most powerful experience ever to have 1,000 bodies just like, like for like frequently, like throughout the set. So there's just like things like that you just can never replicate, and I'm trying to always get at that, like that just kind of, like sometimes when I'm using text, for example, I'll have like these Easter eggs, like maybe I'll have a conversation with someone right before and we'll be talking about something, and I'll just use that as the reference, like for some text use, and only that one person will be like, what the fuck? like dude, we were just talking about that. But it'll just be that one person that knows. And that's all that matters to me, is that there's like one human that like kind of got it, And so there's something really magical to me about like those kinds of unique experiences that just cannot be replicated, and they don't need to be projected out to like a massive audience of, like it doesn't need to be handheld or expelled out for you. Like it's just part of the magic of what's happening, and multiple layers of that. So, yeah. I think I saw a couple of, yeah.
Thanks. I might be wrong with this, I'm not sure, but from when I was listening, it sounded to me like there was a beginning, middle, and end. Mm-hmm. And I, might have a predisposition to try to find a narrative or storytelling in it, but yeah. I'm just curious as to like what was going through your head when you're doing that, and how do you know when it's the end?
Yeah,
like how you got to the end part.
I love that. Actually, that's how I think about all of my forms, is there's a beginning and there's a middle and there's an end. And I think the way that it's constructed formally is through just decision making. So like what's actually happening in real time is because the instrument with the voice, it's so, its envelope is just so immediate, right? Like if I were to play a piano, the durational value of however long that would be for my action would be X number of seconds. With a voice, it's just, and it's done, right? For the action, the end of the note is literally just your inaction, your breath. And so what's happening for me psychologically is this kind of micro-macro situation where I'm at once focusing on the organization of just like one sound to the next, while also my compositional brain from the macro level is like thinking about ratios and proportions and about contrasts. And so when I'm like maybe working through some really frenetic material, like, you know, maybe my macro brain is like, I want something to complement that, or I want something to juxtapose that with like long spaciousness. And so that will kind of trigger my decision-making brains to come in. And so when I just commit to that decision, that's the change of the form. So that's kind of how the narrative is sort of built, is literally just my working in real time to try to shape something that has proportional interest. And then at the same time, like working through the actual organization of how those sounds are functioning on a real-time basis. But outside of that, there's no like, I mean, I think there is this sort of cinematic quality to my music that I think maybe that is that is simply an outcome of the process. It's not the goal in and of itself. But when I think about cinema, or when I think about why that is the case, you know, a lot of what I'm trying to do is like create and offer an alternate sense of time, like how to experience time. Okay. And I think there's something really powerful about music as an actual medium as a way to offer that alternative experience of how time feels, time made audible in that way. So I try to get at that with my music and try to kind of get at that formally with these proportional decisions that I'm making. But it's all constructed on a language that, you know, that has been developed over time. And a lot of that is like using, maybe we can just talk a little bit about the actual tools of what's happening, if that's helpful.
Absolutely, I think so. I mean, do you all want to know what's up here? I'm curious.
So I mean, essentially, like, what it is, I'm running like 5 microphones through a mixer, and they've all got different qualities to them, and they've all got different fidelities and reasons why I'm using them. But this one really came from just this dynamic mic, and this was my initial kind of instrument, and I was using this just running through a mixer for a few years, just working through not only the vocal technique, but actual the amplified technique, because it's the playback of what you hear. That's where the interest for me sonically is. And a lot of that reference point came from, a discovery of like Aphex Twin and Autechre and a bunch of these electronic guys, but also, in the new music side, like Cage and Feldman. And so I was trying to develop this relationship to the speaker and the voice, and that channeled through the microphone. So I was just using that for a few years and just meddling with EQ, like just the 3 bands on a mixer, thinking, wait, if I put the bass frequencies up, right, I can really get a meaty sound. Or back in 2014, everyone was obsessed with ASMR, like it was like just coming up. So I was like, like just really like getting into the textures of that with the mouth. And I was working with that for several years. And then I got asked to perform in like a noise festival, and I was like, what the hell is that? And so then I found this like cassette, this like Radio Shack 90s cassette tape player, and it had like a microphone built in it with this tiny little component. And if I crank the gain up, it gets this really distorted sound. But what I realized using it is that it allows me to achieve a certain tool that is really useful for me in like sort of tension building. So what I can do is like when you're cold and you have your jaw like kind of has this lock. If I use that technique on this microphone, you can get this really cool like fluttering effect. So. And that's really like drama, like tension building, and the longevity of that is really exciting. And so I was just using I just, and this great distortion of like. So, awesome microphone. And then I started getting obsessed like with the illusion of things, rah rah. So I was really interested in kind of this idea of polyphony and trying to create multiple sound sources coming out of one source. So I was doing a lot of water play at the time. I was like really interested in water, and I realized like, wait, there's this whole area of my body that I'm not using that is actually so beautiful and resonant. And if I just like try to figure out how to amplify it, I can get some pretty cool results. So I started using a contact microphone on my throat, and it picks up all these resonances that you just wouldn't be able to hear otherwise. So even my swallowing, for example. It's like, what the hell? And so I started playing around with that, and what I was getting at was like new techniques around like independence of sound sources. So for example, one of the things I like to do vocally is like go from like a straight tone to a vocal fry, which hopefully people know, and then just go somewhere in between. So for example, if I go, and so when I go, and you can get really cool overtones from that, but when I put the contact mic while I'm doing that, it sounds awesome. So it really sounds almost like a cello or some sort of like hard bowing, like string instrument. And there's all these other things that opens up. So if I do the vocal fry, and then it actually opens up my mouth as an independent sound source. So if I'm like, so you can create, again, that illusion of polyphony, that idea that you've got two things happening at once, but it's all from the same body. So the contact mic has tons of really cool like vocabulary that comes with it. And then I have my favorite one, which like I never like experienced this until like Gen Z became like college level. But this like I guess looks like a vape. What? And so like a bunch of like Gen Z people are like, "What's that vape that you're using?" And I'm like, "What?" This is literally like a 1980s cassette tape player. Like, yeah, it's just funny. So my vape is this like cassette tape player from the 80s.
It's massive.
I know. And it's just literally like, it has a microphone in it, and when I press record, it's just live monitoring the mic. And that's how I'm able to get the feedback, the beautiful, like sentimental sounding feedback that I love. And also just like suck on it and create all sorts of like cool sounds from it.
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah.
When you're doing this, so is it an illusion or are you actually sucking?
Yeah, I'm actually sucking. This is the direct
like going
action.
like this, and I was like,
Yeah, so there's like there's a way that I can use my teeth to like kind of control the feedback, like the different partials that the feedback will respond to. But I'm also running it through a 15-band graphics equalizer where I can like attenuate the specific frequencies that I want to hear, that I feel like are resonant to the space. And that's what I figure out a lot in my sound checks, is like what actually sounds good. And so when I'm live monitoring it like this, you can get beautiful. And then when I suck on it, you can really get crunchy stuff that's coming out of that. So a lot of, I have like 10 of these. Like every time they come online on eBay, I'm like, zoop. So, you know, there's a lot of like great things that can come from that. And then I have an actual radio from Radio Shack. I wish they sponsored me. But it's a radio, and I like it because it's specific to where we are. Latvian radio is crazy, by the way. But it's cool. It's just sort of a reminder of that, I think. And then all of that, and I've got my new toy, which is by this New York-based maker called Landscape FM. They're really famous for this like really cool instrument they have called the stereo field. But this is just a cassette tape, like scrubber, I guess, like a manual, like you just manually like crank the playback. So basically, what it sounds like is like a scratch, which I really love. And so I got kind of meta with it, and I recorded my own voice onto the tape, and then that's what's running through it. So it sounds like that. It sounds like this. And you can control the speed of the tape. So if I want really like low, meaty stuff, I can just slow it down. I want like chipmunk. Like I can really speed it up. Sorry. And then all of that gets routed to this guy, which came much later, about 3 years ago. And basically what this is just a live processing tool. It's Eurorack, but I have like pitch tracking, I have granular synthesis, I have a bunch of filters that run through it, so like low pass filters and high pass filters that then, you know, the cutoff gets changed through random control voltage that goes through it. I also have panning and reverb. And so that really then brings it into this like multi-dimensional world, I think, for me, the actual music. So I can go from like a really wet sound, like reverb-wise, and snap it back into a super dry space. So for example, if I'm using verb, so it's fast, it's frenetic. It takes its inspirations like from music concrete, which I know you've studied really deeply, and sort of having this idea of like, I guess, yeah, high variance and three-dimensionality with sound is something that I'm really excited by, and I'm trying to explore deeper, both in the recorded medium and live space. So that's the full gamut right now, I think, of my setup. Yeah.
I was really interested when you were talking about sort of the timeline you're on of like the earlier like brutality and then kind of introducing more like other musical elements.
Yeah.
And I think today I was really struck by like how I felt during the performance. So this is my second time seeing you. The first time seeing you, we played a noise festival together, and I remember like in that sea of harsh noise, your set being particularly like tension inducing for me, right? And like a way that experimental music can do in a great way. But today, I felt much more like immersed in the sound, and it was like less jarring for me. So I was wondering, like, as you've been on that timeline, emotionally while you're playing, do you like feel differently? Do you get different things out of it?
Yeah.
Since you've been doing like the harsher stuff into the
Totally.
other musical stuff, and how that feels for you.
Which festival was that?
It was in Asbury Park in that alleyway. It was like
Oh my God, New Jersey!
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, the alleyway noise show. Oh yeah, I remember. Amazing. Yeah, whoa, such a great observation. The first noise show I did was End Times in 2017. That was what prompted this microphone. And it was a 5-minute long set. And it wasn't because I intended it to be 5 minutes, but it's because it felt so antagonistic to me that I was like, I have to get off this stage, like, now. It was like me, like standing, and then it was like less than a meter, and it was just old dudes, just like a crescent of old men, and they were standing like this, and I was just like, and I was like, fuck you! Like I I was like doing this whole thing, it riled me up, and it is that like super hostile part of me. It was like, yeah, fuck you all, like kind of thing. And it's so funny because I know each of those guys now, and I'm like, they couldn't be like the nicest people ever. But there was something really sort of initially hostile about that experience, and I think it kind of made me, made my music sort of respond in that way. And as I've matured, I think I've just gotten a lot more comfortable with presence and just like allowing things to just be, and like not try to control too much, because I think I can get a little Captain Kirky, about some things. And like as I've gotten older and as I've gotten more comfortable with like my own body and like letting go, a really great source of influence for me is this painter, Frank Auerbach, who like was around during the 80s, kind of during Francis Bacon's period in the UK. 80s? Maybe earlier than that, actually. And his process is really interesting. Basically, my understanding of it is like he'll come up with a subject to paint like an apple, for example, and he'll spend months just conceiving of this apple, like every possible notion of this apple, but he won't make a single sketch. It'll just be a complete immersion of that thing. And when he's ready, he'll sit down and he will just do it in one fell swoop. Like it'll be one sitting, and that will be what it is. And as improvisers, I think there's something really inspirational about that approach, where you take this practice and you become really intimate with it. You pull it apart, you practice it. And what I do when I practice is I'll run through like hundreds of iterations of this, like this mic to this thing, this together, blah, 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 like roll through the whole gamut, such that when I sit down to actually perform, the truth of that experience comes out very authentically. And so I've gotten, I think as I've gotten older, like matured, I've gone closer and closer at trying to get at that experience of like actually just being present. And I'm in my early 30s now, and I think there's like probably some connection with that, and how in my 20s I was very fragmented, and I thought of things as very polarized. Like my experience of things was highly polarized, like extremes. And I think that also came out in my music. And now I'm like in this point where like everything is one full being, and maybe that's sort of Buddhist to say, but it's all one being, it's all one entity, and I'm starting to let go of the polarity parts and allowing for everything to just be present. And so I think what you're experiencing is some real-time unraveling of that. And it's really cool to hear you having that reference point, because I do know exactly my mindset when I was in that noise festival. Yeah.
I don't know about you all, but I am dying to hear more of this now. Will we? Yeah? Okay, because I didn't know you were going to rest your voice maybe for a minute if you want to drink some tea. But then I think we should hear some more with what we've just talked about, settle, percolate a little bit. So, thanks, everyone.
Thanks to Asian Art Initiative for having me. Thanks to Danielle for hosting this conversation. Thank you. I do have records for sale that I'm self-releasing in the shop, as Danielle has their book as well. And
Gift shop back there.
There's a gift shop. It's really cool. I encourage you to check it out. Yeah. And feel free to come and chat and check out what's the mess of this. But yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Charmaine. Thank you, Danielle. The gift shop is in the back. That's going to be open. The gallery is open for a little bit as well. But like Anne said, Sound Type is a conversation between writers and musicians. So the writers cohort, we're going to hang back in this space. So everybody, you have about 30, 40 minutes before you got to get the hell out. But thank you for coming. But we got so much good programming the rest of the year. I'm just going to tell you about a few of the concerts that we have, the music programming we have coming up. So this Thursday is the last of our Words and Sound series with Maya and Naomi Nakanishi. They're coming to perform. Hell yeah. On Saturday, moderated by Connie Lee. Hey. So come check that out. On Saturday will be a live performance of the Revival video series by Rashid Zakat, followed by a conversation between our own curator Joyce Chung with Maori Holmes, who is the guest curator of the exhibition. And we just booked this concert. Tickets aren't up yet, but you're the first to know that DJ Foodman is going to be coming through December 18th. Come check him out. And then, sign up for our newsletter. You'll be the first to know about what SoundType 2025 SoundType is coming back next year. So please sign up for the newsletter to learn about the acts that will be coming through. And we are looking for the next writers cohort. That application should be live Monday. I hope, fingers crossed, everybody. But if you're interested in applying, please check it out. We are looking for 8 new writers to join us and be a part of this this great concert series. So again, gift shop is open, gallery is open. Please leave in a little bit, but please do come back again for all of our great programming. Thank you so much. One more round of applause for Charmaine Lee.